Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I never thought I'd have to say this out loud, but here I am. I've been silent for months, maybe longer, trying to figure out how to explain something that still doesn't fully make sense to me. People think preparing for marriage is about invitations, flowers, and timing. But for me, it's been about silence, misunderstandings, and heartbreak I didn't expect to feel again. The truth is, Taehyung and Jimin won't be coming to my wedding, not because they weren't invited, but because of something much deeper. Something I never thought would come between us. I don't even know when this wedding will happen. There's no date, no venue, not even a confirmed plan yet. I'm still standing somewhere between certainty and confusion. But what I do know is that the moment I said I was ready to settle down, something inside our friendship shifted. You know, people always talk about brotherhood in BTS as if it's unbreakable. And maybe it is, but even the strongest bond changes under the weight of time, love, and choices that don't fit into old versions of who we used to be. When I first told the members that I was thinking about marriage, the room went quiet. Namjoon looked proud, like a father watching his son finally grow into his own path. Jin laughed a little, teased me about finally becoming an adult. Yoongi didn't say much, just nodded, like he understood something. The rest didn't. But Jimin, he just stared at me. Not angry, not sad, but as if he was trying to read every word I didn't say. Taehyung, on the other hand, smiled that soft, mysterious smile of his and said, "Are you sure, Jungkook? You've always been married to your dreams." And I thought that was just him being poetic. I didn't realize then that it was also a warning. The next few days were strange. Our group chat went quiet. Normally, Jimin would send a photo of coffee or a random meme to start the day. Taehyung would reply with a video of his dog or some weird philosophical thought. But nothing came, just silence. I thought maybe everyone was busy, but the silence started to feel heavier, like something had cracked beneath the surface. I tried calling Jimin one night, no answer. I called Taehyung after that, straight to voicemail. When we finally met again at the studio, the air was heavy. I remember Jimin looking at me with that mix of warmth and distance, the kind that tells you he still cares, but he's protecting himself from something. He said quietly, "You really meant it, didn't you? You're going to get married." I nodded. And then he said something I'll never forget. "You used to say we'd always face everything together, but this time you didn't even ask if we were ready to let you go." It hit me like lightning. I never thought of marriage as leaving anyone behind. But for him, it felt like a goodbye. The truth is, I haven't chosen anyone yet. There's no ring, no engagement, no announcement. It's just a plan, a thought, a direction I might take when the time feels right. But in their eyes, it felt like I was crossing a line that would separate the past from the future forever. I started to understand something about love and friendship that I never understood before. Sometimes when you grow, you don't mean to hurt the people you love, but growth demands space. And that space can look like distance, even betrayal. I thought love was about adding people to your life, but it's also about letting go of the version of yourself that others were comfortable with. Jimin once told me during our younger days, "You'll always have us. Even when you find someone else, you'll still have us." I believed that, but the closer I got to thinking about marriage, the more that promise started to feel like a question. Taehyung, on the other hand, took it differently. He said, "Hyung, I get it. You're human. You want a normal life." But there was something behind that smile, a distance, like he was already preparing for a world where I wasn't always beside him on stage, in the studio, or on those long, quiet nights when music was our only comfort. He told me that fame makes you forget how to be ordinary, and marriage makes you remember. I didn't understand it then, but now I do. When you start wanting something real, something that doesn't need cameras or applause, you start losing the version of yourself that people fell in love with. That's when everything began to spiral in small, silent ways. Our conversations became shorter, our jokes didn't land the same. The group dinners felt more formal, like everyone was playing a role they didn't quite fit into anymore. One night, after rehearsal, Jimin stayed behind. I thought he wanted to talk about choreography, but instead he asked, "If you get married, do we stop being family?" I froze. I didn't know how to answer. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't asking about the group. He was asking if I could still be his brother once I belonged to someone else. That night, I went home and couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, the way his voice trembled just slightly. I realized that for years, we'd built something that went beyond music, something sacred. And now, by talking about marriage, I had disturbed that balance. I thought about how many nights Jimin had stayed up to listen to my worries. How Taehyung had stood by me when I doubted myself. How Yoongi, Jin, Namjoon, and Hobi had all become pieces of the foundation that made me who I am. And yet, here I was wanting something that didn't include all of them in the same way anymore. People think a wedding is a celebration, but for me, it's been a mirror. It reflects every unresolved thing, every unspoken fear, every piece of myself I've hidden behind music and fame. I started to ask myself if I even deserve this kind of happiness. If wanting a life outside the spotlight means betraying the people who built that light with me. I've learned that love isn't always about choosing someone. Sometimes it's about facing who you become when you choose. The truth is, Taehyung and Jimin aren't against my wedding. They're afraid of what it means. They've seen me lose myself before to expectations, pressure, and the endless chase for perfection. Maybe they're scared I'll lose myself again, this time to the idea of love. Or maybe they're just scared to watch me change in ways that they can't follow. And honestly, I can't blame them. If you've ever loved people so much that even your joy feels like betrayal, you'll understand. I'm not angry. I'm just learning that love in every form, romantic or brotherly, requires courage. The courage to be misunderstood, to walk alone for a while, to believe that time will heal what silence can't. I still hope they'll be there when the day comes, whenever it comes. But if they're not, I'll still carry them with me. Because some bonds don't need to stand beside you to stay with you. And maybe one day, when the noise fades, when the world stops expecting us to be the same boys we were, we'll sit together again, not as idols or legends, but as men who've learned what it means to love and let go at the same time. Until then, I'll keep practicing becoming the kind of person they can be proud of, even from a distance. Because love, whether it's for a friend, a brother, or someone you hope to marry, isn't about possession, it's about presence. And I'll never stop showing up for them, even if it means standing alone for a while. When the news started spreading before I even said anything publicly, I could feel the energy changing around me. The word marriage has a strange power. It makes people see you differently, even if nothing's official yet. I didn't announce it, but rumors always find a way to escape. The press twisted it into something dramatic. Jungkook secretly engaged. BTS members react coldly. Jimin unfollows Jungkook privately. None of it was true. But the problem was that pieces of it felt true emotionally. The distance, the silence, the tension, it was all real. Taehyung texted me late one night after those headlines broke. It wasn't a long message, just, "Don't let them write our story for us." I remember staring at that text for a long time. It felt like both a warning and a plea. He's always had this way of saying the most profound things in the simplest sentences. I didn't reply right away because I didn't know what my story even was anymore. I was living somewhere between privacy and guilt, wanting to protect what's still mine while not losing the people who made me who I am. A few days later, I saw Jimin again. It wasn't planned. We ran into each other at Hybe. He was finishing vocal practice. I was heading to a meeting. It was awkward at first, the kind of silence that holds years of history. Then he smiled, that half smile that's both comfort and ache. "You're avoiding me," he said softly. "I'm not," I lied. He nodded like he already knew. "I just wish you'd told me first, that's all. Not through someone else, not through the noise." I can't explain how heavy that hit me, because he was right. I hadn't told him first. I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping things quiet until it was real. But in doing that, I'd built walls where bridges used to be. I told him I wasn't even sure yet that I didn't have all the answers. He looked at me with that same patience he always has and said, "You don't need all the answers. You just need to stay honest." That night, I went home and wrote down everything I couldn't say out loud about how scared I was, not of marriage itself, but of how it would change me, how it would change us. The fear that maybe I'd wake up one day and find that the brotherhood that built my world had quietly dissolved into polite distance. I think Jimin sensed that too, because loving people for so long means, their silence is better than their words. Taehyung, meanwhile, stayed quiet. That's his way. When he feels hurt, he doesn't lash out, he retreats. It's not coldness, it's protection. He watches from afar, trying to make sense of things before deciding whether to step closer or walk away. One evening, I texted him, "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" He replied hours later, "Right or wrong doesn't matter, just make sure it's real." That one sentence stayed in my mind for weeks. Make sure it's real. It echoed every time I thought about what marriage really meant. Was it about love or peace? Or proving to myself that I could live a normal life after years of chaos? The truth is, I don't even know what normal looks like anymore. The stage became my home, the members, my family, the music, my heartbeat, and now I'm trying to build something beyond that, a place that doesn't need applause to feel alive. But here's the strange part. The more I thought about love, the more I realized how much it looked like what BTS always stood for: trust, consistency, faith, growth. Those values weren't just for fans or the world. They were for us. I remembered nights when Taehyung stayed up late talking about art and honesty, or when Jimin cried quietly after a concert. Not from sadness, but from being overwhelmed by gratitude. Those were the same emotions love demands, humility, vulnerability, courage. So how could something that came from the same roots now divide us? I started volunteering again around that time. Not for publicity, just to feel grounded. To remind myself that connection isn't about fame or legacy. It's about showing up. There was one woman I met there, older, maybe in her 50s. She said something that stuck with me. Sometimes love doesn't begin with falling for someone. It begins when you stop running from yourself. I don't know why, but that felt like a message meant for me. Because maybe that's what this whole thing is about. Not marriage, not misunderstanding, but learning to stop running. The next week, Namjoon came to my place. He didn't ask, he just showed up. He looked around, saw the scattered notebooks and cold coffee cups, and said, "You're thinking too much again." I laughed. He sat down and added, "You don't have to choose between love and loyalty, Kook. You just have to be clear about what each means to you." He always has this ability to simplify chaos. "The others will understand," he continued. "They're just scared. Change always feels like loss before it feels like growth." That's when I realized something I hadn't before. Maybe Taehyung and Jimin's distance wasn't rejection, it was mourning. Mourning the end of a version of us that would never come back. The one where we were boys sharing dreams, fears, and ramen at 3 a.m. The one untouched by time, fame, or adult choices. My decision to even talk about marriage symbolized a shift none of us were ready for. The moment we stopped being boys and became men with separate lives. Still, I wish they knew how much they mean to me. How no future could ever erase what they've been in my past. I wish they understood that my heart doesn't have compartments, it expands. That loving someone new doesn't mean loving them less. That the idea of walking down an aisle feels incomplete without knowing they're somewhere in the crowd. Even if they're sitting quietly in the back, watching, forgiving. Sometimes, late at night, I still replay the memories, the laughter, the rehearsals, the small moments that made us real beyond the fame. And I whisper to myself that maybe one day, when the noise settles and the world stops trying to define us, we'll find our way back to that simple truth again. That love in every form is meant to be shared, not feared. And when that day comes, I hope Jimin and Taehyung will walk through that door again, not as guests at my wedding, but as brothers who never truly left. I didn't plan for things to get this complicated. I thought telling the truth would bring peace, not distance. But the moment my thoughts about marriage became public, even unintentionally, the world started writing stories I didn't recognize. Suddenly, every silence between us became proof. Every unposted photo became evidence. It's strange how fast love can turn into a headline when you live under a spotlight. And maybe that's why I try to keep everything private. Because some things lose their meaning the moment they're shared with everyone. The truth is, I'm not even sure what marriage means for someone like me. It's not just about standing at an altar or wearing a ring. It's about learning how to build something real in a world that constantly questions your sincerity. It's about daring to be ordinary when the world insists on seeing you as extraordinary. But that's exactly what scares people, especially the ones who've shared your journey. Because when you stop living for the spotlight, it feels like you're walking away from the very thing that brought you together. One night, I met Taehyung for dinner. It wasn't planned. We just happened to end up at the same restaurant. I could tell he wasn't there by accident though. He always knows where I am, even when I don't say it out loud. We sat there quietly at first. Then he said, "So, you're really doing this?" I hesitated. "Doing what?" I asked. "Growing up," he said. That made me laugh, but not the kind that feels funny. The kind that hurts because you realize someone's seeing through you completely. He looked out the window and added, "You know what I'm scared of? That we'll all drift so far apart one day that even our laughter won't sound like us anymore." I wanted to tell him that could never happen, but I knew he was right. People change, and so do connections. The hardest part is realizing that even love has to evolve. I told him, "I'm scared too, but maybe growing up doesn't mean losing what we had. Maybe it means finding new ways to keep it alive." He didn't say anything after that, just nodded. Sometimes silence says more than words. A week later, I finally got to talk with Jimin again. He came over, unannounced, the way he always used to when we were younger. I opened the door, and before I could say anything, he said, "You haven't changed your curtains in years." That was his way of saying, "I missed you." We sat down, and for a while, it felt like nothing had changed. We talked about small things, the new dance project he's planning, the way Yoongi's been pushing himself again in the studio. Then he looked at me and said quietly, "You know why it hurt, right?" I stayed quiet. He continued, "It wasn't because you're thinking about marriage. It's because I didn't know how to fit into your new life anymore." That broke something inside me, because I never wanted him or any of them to feel that way. I told him, "You always fit, you always will," but he smiled sadly. That's what people say before things really change. It's strange how love between friends can feel so much like heartbreak when life moves forward. We didn't fight, we didn't even cry. We just sat there, both knowing that something was ending, even if we couldn't name what it was. After he left, I sat alone for a long time. I kept thinking about the idea of family. We always said BTS was more than a band, it was a family. But families change too. People grow, move, marry, have children, chase their own path. You don't stop loving them, you just start loving them differently. That realization hurt, but it also felt honest. Maybe that's what love really is. Staying connected through honesty, not control. Namjoon called me the next day. "Jimin told me he saw you," he said. I laughed. "He reports everything, huh?" Namjoon chuckled softly. "He worries, that's all." Then his tone shifted. "You know, Kook, sometimes people aren't upset because of what you do. They're upset because they don't know how to follow you into your next chapter. They're afraid they'll be left behind in the old one." He paused. "Make sure they know there's room for them in your future." That line stuck with me. Room for them in my future. I realized that was what this was really about. Not the wedding, not the rumors, not even love. It was about space. How to create enough of it to grow without pushing away the people who've shaped you. I started reaching out again. not to fix things, but to be present. I sent Jimin a voice note of a song idea. He didn't reply right away, but a few days later, he sent back a harmony. No words, no explanations, just music. That's how we speak when words don't work anymore. And Taehyung? He showed up at my place one evening with his guitar. No warning, no message. He just sat down, strummed a few chords, and said, "Remember this one?" It was an old melody we wrote years ago but never released. I laughed because I remembered every note. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't need to. Sometimes healing doesn't look like deep conversation. It looks like two friends making music again, quietly, like nothing broke in the first place. That night, when he left, I realized something about love that no one tells you. It's not about agreement or even understanding. It's about returning. Again and again, no matter how far apart you wander. People think love fades when distance grows, but maybe it just learns how to speak softer. Maybe it waits. So no, I don't know when I'll get married. I don't know what the day will look like or who will be there. But I do know this. Whether or not Jimin and Taehyung attend, their fingerprints are on every part of who I've become. Every laugh, every scar, every melody, they built that. And that's something no absence can erase. Sometimes I imagine it, the wedding, the quiet music, the faces of everyone I love. And even if 2 seats stay empty, I'll know they're not really gone. Because love doesn't need attendance, it just needs memory. And I'll carry theirs always in everything I do. There are nights when I lie awake staring at the ceiling, and the silence feels heavier than any sound I've ever known. It's not loneliness, it's reflection. Because the closer I get to this idea of marriage, the more I realize how fragile connection really is. People think that love is about the big promises, the forever kind of declarations. But the truth? It's built in the small spaces between missed calls, quiet glances, the words you almost said but didn't. That's where everything lives. And that's where I started losing Jimin and Taehyung without even noticing. I've been thinking a lot about how everything started. How 7 boys turned into a story the whole world watched unfold. Back then, love meant loyalty. We didn't even have to say it. It was just there in the way we showed up for each other. When someone fell, the rest lifted him. When someone cried, the others laughed just loud enough to make him forget. It was simple, sacred, unspoken. But life has a way of testing what you believe will never change. And growing up means facing that maybe not everything was meant to stay the same. I saw Jimin again during rehearsals for something we weren't even sure we'd do. It was strange seeing him move with the same grace that once felt like home to me. I stood in the corner, watching, thinking about how much of my life has been defined by moments like that. Him dancing, Taehyung humming softly, all of us finding meaning in rhythm and light. After practice, he came over and said, "You've changed your way of moving." I smiled and said, "So have you." He looked at me and said quietly, "Yeah, but not for the same reason." I knew what he meant. His changes were about healing. Mine were about hiding. Taehyung, on the other hand, has always had this way of making the heavy things sound simple. He called me one night after weeks of silence. "You still sing the same when you're sad," he said. I didn't even ask how he knew. He's the kind of person who just does. "You're worried about the wrong things, Kook," he continued. "The people who really love you don't disappear just because you start living differently." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that love can survive transformation. But the problem isn't love, it's expectation. People fall in love with a version of you. And when you start evolving, they have to grieve the person you were. And maybe that's what this all is, a kind of grief. A quiet mourning for the version of BTS that existed before adult life started knocking. Before we had to ask ourselves who we were without the stage, without the noise, without each other constantly near. I can still feel them with me in small ways. Jimin's laughter echoing when I'm alone in the studio. Taehyung's voice saying, "Take your time," when I rush through things. Namjoon's calm logic in my head reminding me that peace isn't found, it's practiced. The truth is, I haven't found peace yet. I'm trying to. but I'm still caught between what I owe the past and what I need for the future. When I think about the wedding, this event that hasn't even been planned, it's not the ceremony that scares me. It's the symbolism. Marriage means stepping into a life where my heart belongs to someone else. And as beautiful as that sounds, part of me wonders if that means closing a chapter that's been open for more than a decade. I talked to Hobie about it recently. He has this way of bringing light into any conversation. He listened quietly and then said, "You know, we used to joke that you'd be the last to get married. Not because you couldn't, but because your heart was always married to something else. Music, people, moments." He smiled and added, "Maybe that's still true. Maybe you're not choosing between love and friendship. Maybe you're learning how to hold both." That night, I thought about what holding both means. Maybe it's not about balance. Maybe it's about acceptance that love doesn't always fit into categories. The kind of love I have for Jimin and Taehyung isn't supposed to fade when another love begins. It's supposed to expand. But humans aren't built for easy expansion. We feel change like loss, even when it's growth. I started writing again, not songs for an album, but letters I'll probably never send, one for each of them. Jimin's begins with "You taught me tenderness." Taehyung's begins with "You taught me stillness," because those are the things they gave me without even knowing it. Jimin showed me how to feel everything deeply without shame. Taehyung showed me how to slow down long enough to actually feel it. Together, they made me understand that love isn't something you find, it's something you build between people who dare to stay. Sometimes I wonder if that's why it hurts so much. Because part of me wishes they'd just be angry. Anger is easier to face than silence. But what we're living in now isn't anger, it's distance made of care. They're giving me space to grow, even if it means they have to step back. And that kind of love is rarer than people realize. It's not loud, it doesn't post or explain itself, it just trusts time to heal what words can't. When I imagine the future, I don't see a perfect ending. I see a long dinner table somewhere, quiet. Not cameras, not fans, just us, older, calmer, smiling about all the storms we survived. I'll look at Jimin and Taehyung then and think, we made it through silence. Because silence, as I've learned, isn't the absence of love, it's the test of it. So maybe they won't be at my wedding, maybe they'll need time. But I know this much. Love doesn't vanish just because it isn't witnessed. It lives in the space between understanding and forgiveness. And I'll wait for that moment when we meet again, not as the people the world knows, but as the brothers who never stop believing that love in any form is worth holding on to. Sometimes I wonder when everything started to feel so fragile. Not in a dramatic way, just in that quiet, almost invisible sense that something sacred is shifting beneath your feet. I look at old photos, our faces glowing with youth, laughter, and hunger for the future. And I realize how much we've lived since then. Success, loss, joy, exhaustion, all tangled together. And now, here I am, facing one of the biggest decisions of my life. Not as an idol, but as a man who just wants peace. I never thought peace could feel so complicated. People keep asking me when the wedding is, but they don't understand that there's no date, no final choice, not even certainty. It's not about timing, it's about readiness. Because how can I build a life with someone new when parts of my heart are still learning how to let go of what shaped me? That's what no one tells you about love. Before you can promise forever to someone else, you have to make peace with the ghosts of everything that made you who you are. And my ghosts have names: Jimin, Taehyung, Namjoon, Yoongi, Hobie, Jin. They're not haunting me. They're the echoes of every version of myself I've ever been. The other night, I dreamed we were all together again. Not performing, not rehearsing, just sitting on the dorm floor, eating instant noodles, laughing about nothing. There was no spotlight, no cameras, no tension, just warmth. I woke up missing something I can't recreate, because time moves forward and people evolve. But some parts of you never stop reaching for the simplicity of the past. Maybe that's why I'm struggling so much to step into this new chapter, because part of me is still living in that dorm, surrounded by the people who first taught me what family meant. I met Taehyung recently for coffee. We didn't talk about anything serious at first. We joked, teased each other like always. Then he said, "You've become quieter lately." I nodded. "Just thinking more," I said. "About what?" he asked. I hesitated before replying. "About whether I can have both the dream and a normal life." He took a sip of his coffee, eyes steady on me. "You can," he said, but not at the same time. That line hit harder than I expected, because he's right. Every gain demands a sacrifice, even the good things. I thought about that all day, about how BTS taught me to give everything to my art, to people, to the world. But marriage demands something different. It's not a stage you perform on. It's a mirror you have to face every day. There's no choreography, no edits, no applause, just truth. The idea of that kind of rawness scares me, even after all these years of sharing my life publicly. Because fame teaches you how to show the best version of yourself. Love teaches you to live with the unedited one. Later that week, Jimin called. It had been a while. His voice sounded softer, older somehow. "Are you okay?" he asked. I said I was, but he didn't believe me. "You sound like someone trying to convince himself." I laughed because he was right. He always knows. Then he said, "You don't have to choose between us and your future. We were never meant to be a cage. We were meant to be your wings." I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened, because that's what I had been afraid of, that pursuing happiness meant betraying them. But hearing him say that made me realize something. Maybe love isn't about choosing, it's about trusting that what's real will survive change. After we hung up, I sat by the window for hours. It was raining, and the city looked blurred through the glass like a watercolor painting. I thought about how every drop on that window represented a different version of me, each one falling, merging, disappearing into something bigger. That's how life works. We think we're separate stories, but we're all part of one stream. Jimin and Taehyung, they'll always flow through me, no matter where I end up. I went back to the studio that night, not to record, just to sit. The smell of microphones, cables, and wooden floors always calms me. It reminds me that no matter how much changes, some things stay sacred. I picked up my guitar and started humming an old melody we wrote years ago. It was soft, simple, imperfect, somewhere between sadness and hope. And as I played, I realized this love doesn't erase the past. It honors it. Every person who shaped you becomes part of the way you love others. That's when I understood why Jimin and Taehyung's silence hurt so much. Because it wasn't anger, it was fear. Fear that I'd build a life that no longer had room for them. Fear that the version of me they loved would disappear. But what they don't know yet is that everything I've become is because of them. The patience I've learned, the empathy, the courage, it all traces back to them. Without those years of shared struggle, I wouldn't even know how to love, honestly. Sometimes I wish I could explain that marriage, for me, isn't an escape. It's an extension. It's me trying to bring the same depth we built as brothers into a different kind of bond. The kind where love isn't loud or grand, but steady and real, where you don't have to perform to be understood. That's what I crave now. Not fame, not recognition, just a quiet kind of truth. I don't know when it will happen. I don't even know if the person I'll marry is ready for what my life really looks like. But I do know this. When it happens, I want it to be honest. I want the people who know my heart best, Jimin, Taehyung, and the others, to see that I didn't change to forget them. I changed to become someone worthy of everything they taught me. Maybe they won't be there at the wedding. Maybe it'll take time for things to heal. But when I stand there, wherever that is, I'll think of them. Of all the nights we stayed up dreaming, all the tears, all the laughter, all the silent prayers before big stages. Because love, real love, doesn't vanish when you walk a different path. It walks beside you, invisible but eternal. And one day, when the noise of life quiets, I know we'll find our way back to each other, just like always. There's a strange thing about silence. It doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it just means that everyone's waiting for someone else to speak first. That's where we are now. Me, Jimin, Taehyung, all standing on opposite ends of the same truth. Too careful, too afraid, too proud to step closer. It's not anger anymore, it's hesitation. The kind that comes from loving people so deeply you don't want to say the wrong thing and break what's still left. The more I think about it, the more I realize this was never about a wedding. It's about what love does to friendship when life starts demanding different versions of you. When we were younger, love meant staying up together until 3 amperes. Sharing fears, singing in unlit rooms, talking about dreams like they were certain. But now, love looks quieter. It looks like space. It looks like choosing not to argue, even when you're hurt. It looks like letting go without closing the door. The last time I saw them both in the same room was at a dinner organized by Namjoon. He said it was just to catch up, but I knew what he was trying to do, bring us back to the table. Yoongi was there too, calm as ever, observing more than speaking. Jin cracked jokes to fill the silence, and Hobie laughed too loudly, like he was trying to keep the energy alive. But under all that noise, I could feel at the distance that wasn't physical but emotional. Jimin sat across from me, and Taehyung sat beside him. We didn't talk much at first. I kept glancing up, hoping one of them would say something, anything, that would make it feel like the old days. But life doesn't rewind, it just rewrites. Halfway through the meal, Jimin finally said, "You look tired, Kook." His voice wasn't sharp, just soft, like he was testing if I'd let him in again. "Yeah," I replied. "I think I've been tired for a long time." Taehyung looked at me and asked, "Do you ever wish things could be simple again?" I nodded, but I couldn't answer right away, because simplicity, once lost, never really comes back. It just changes form. "Sometimes," I said quietly, "but then I remember we earned this complexity. Every stage, every tear, every scar, it made us who we are. I don't want to erase it." He smiled, just barely. "You've been thinking too much again," he said. "You always do when you're scared." And he was right. I was scared. Not of losing them, but of realizing that love might not always mean staying in the same place. That night, after everyone left, Jimin lingered. He looked at me like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. Finally, he whispered, "Do you ever feel like we're growing apart?" I took a deep breath. "I think we're just growing differently." He nodded, eyes glistening. "It's hard, watching you move towards something I don't understand yet." I wanted to tell him that I don't understand it either. That I'm still figuring it out one breath at a time. But I just said, "You'll always be part of it, even if you're not there physically." When I got home that night, I sat in the dark and thought about what he said. Growing differently. It sounds peaceful, but it hurts. Because you can love someone with everything you have and still not move in the same direction. That's what nobody tells you about adulthood. It's not about choosing who you love. It's about learning how to keep loving people who walk different paths. A few days later, I got a message from Taehyung. Just a photo. It was the 6 of us from years ago in the practice room. Sweaty, exhausted, smiling like we own the world. No caption, no words, but I knew what it meant. Remember this. Remember who we were before the noise, before the decisions, before the fears of growing up. I replied with a heart emoji. Nothing more, because sometimes words ruin what memories keep sacred. I went to the studio again that night. The walls there hold more stories than I can count. I played back one of our old demo tracks, one where our voices cracked and laughed through the take. It sounded raw, imperfect, human. And I realized that's all I want for my future, for it to sound real. Not perfect, not polished, just true. People think getting married means finding someone new to replace old love. But that's not what it means for me. It means finding someone who understands that my heart already belongs to too many memories to ever start from zero. Whoever stands beside me one day will have to understand that parts of me will always belong to these 6 men because they built me. They taught me how to love deeply, forgive freely, and dream fearlessly. I know Jimin and Taehyung are protecting something fragile, their idea of us, of who we were. They think if I move forward, the thread might break. But what they don't realize is that the thread was never made of proximity, it was made of love. Real love doesn't break with time. It stretches, it bends, it learns new languages, it adapts. One day, when the dust settles, I know we'll find our rhythm again. Maybe not as the same people, but as wiser, quieter versions of who we've always been. Until then, I'll keep walking forward with gratitude instead of guilt. Because the love we built isn't ending, it's evolving. And when I stand at that altar someday, whenever that day comes, I won't see empty chairs. I'll see the echoes of their laughter, the weight of their support, the love that made me brave enough to love again. They might not be beside me, but they'll be in everything I am. And that, to me, is what forever really means. Sometimes when I'm alone, I replay our first years together in my mind like an old film, the rehearsals that lasted until sunrise, the nights we couldn't sleep from excitement, the way Taehyung's laugh would break tension, and how Jimin's small encouragements would feel like fuel. Back then, I thought love meant staying close forever. I thought proximity was proof of connection. But I was wrong. Love isn't about staying in the same place. It's about growing in the same direction, even when life pushes you onto separate paths. Lately, I've been realizing how much of our silence is made of love that doesn't know how to express itself anymore. Everyone's busy, everyone's changing. We check in, we say, I miss you, but the space between those words keeps getting wider. I see it in the way Jimin hesitates before speaking, the way Taehyung pauses before laughing. It's not that we've stopped caring. It's that we're learning to care from a distance. I've been afraid to admit this out loud, but planning for the future has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Not because of pressure or attention, but because it forces me to accept that I'm no longer the boy who only lived for the next concert. I'm a man now, trying to build something beyond applause. And when I told the members that, it was like I'd spoken a language they didn't want to hear yet. I don't blame them. To them, I'll always be the youngest, the one who needed protection, the one they watched grow up. But the truth is, I'm not that kid anymore. I've seen too much, lost too much, learned too much to ever go back. And maybe that's why it hurts. Because the people who once made you feel safe now have to learn to see you as an equal. Growth always feels like betrayal to someone who knew you before the change. I saw Jimin again recently. He came by unannounced, the way he used to when he wanted to make sure I was eating or sleeping. He looked around my apartment, quiet for a moment, then said, "You live differently now." I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe too differently." He shook his head. "No, just differently enough to scare the people who still see you the way you were." His honesty always cuts deep because it's never cruel, it's care disguised as truth. We sat for hours, talking about nothing and everything. He told me he's been thinking a lot about love too, what it means, what it costs, how much of yourself you have to give away to make it real. "You've always given too much, Kook," he said softly. "I just don't want you to lose yourself again." I promised him I wouldn't, but deep down, I knew that every kind of love requires a small kind of loss. You can't open your heart without leaving a piece of it somewhere. Taehyung called me later that week. His voice was calm, deeper than I remembered. "I saw the news," he said. "You know I don't believe everything they write, right?" I laughed. "You believe some of it though." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe. But you should know something. I'm proud of you." That silence that followed was heavier than any argument, because sometimes the words "I'm proud of you" are really just another way of saying "I forgive you." He told me that he and Jimin had talked about me, about the group, about how things are changing. "We both want you to be happy," he said. "We just don't know how to fit into your new life yet." That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. I kept turning it over in my head, how to fit into your new life. It's such a gentle confession, but it holds so much pain. 'Cause that's the truth. When you evolve, the people who love you have to find new ways to love you too. I went to see Namjoon the next day. His place always smells like coffee and books, like thought and peace. He listened quietly as I spoke, then said, "This is what happens when people grow. It's not separation, it's realignment. Think of it as music. Sometimes the harmony changes key, but the melody stays the same." I smiled because that made sense. We're all still playing the same song, just in different octaves. That night, I opened my old lyric notebook, the one I used during the Love Yourself era. There was a line scribbled in the corner I'd forgotten. "If we drift, let it be the ocean, not the end." I stared at it for a long time and felt this deep calm wash over me. Because that's exactly what I want now. Not permanence, not perfection, just depth. The kind that holds even when you can't see the shore. I think Jimin and Taehyung's absence from my future plans isn't rejection, it's reflection. They're both processing what it means to let me go a little, the same way I'm learning to let parts of myself go too. We all love each other too much to pretend it doesn't hurt. But pain doesn't mean the love is dying, it means it's transforming. And that's something beautiful. Even if it feels heavy, there's a part of me that still dreams they'll be there when the time comes. Maybe not in the front row, maybe not smiling at every photo, but there, somewhere in the crowd, quietly proud, silently supportive. Because real love doesn't demand attention, it just stays quietly watching, quietly believing. And even if they're not there physically, I know I'll carry them with me. In the way I speak, in the way I love, in the way I show up for people, because the lessons they gave me about patience, loyalty, forgiveness are forever. So if one day you hear that I finally got married and you don't see Jimin or Taehyung beside me, don't think it's a story of separation. It's a story of growth. It's proof that sometimes love chooses distance as its way of staying pure. Because the strongest bonds don't always need to be seen, they just need to be felt. And theirs, no matter how far we go, will always be the closest thing to home I'll ever have. Some days, it feels like the world has already decided how my story should go. They think they know who I should be with, what my future should look like, and even who belongs in it. But the truth is, I don't think anyone really understands what this moment feels like. It's not about headlines or rumors. It's about growing up in front of everyone while trying to hold on to pieces of your soul that still belong to the past. And the hardest part of all of it isn't the pressure. It's realizing that the people who once understood me best now look at me like they're not sure who I am anymore. I keep going back to something Namjoon told me a while ago. He said, "You can't build your future while staring in the rearview mirror." I laughed then because it sounded too poetic, too leader-like, too him. But now I understand. I've spent so much time trying to make sure everyone I love is comfortable with my choices that I forgot to ask if I was. Maybe that's why everything feels so heavy lately, because I'm still trying to carry everyone with me when some journeys can only be walked alone. I saw Taehyung again a few weeks ago. We met at a small cafe we used to visit before things got too big, too loud. The kind of place where nobody really cares who you are. He was already sitting there when I arrived, wearing that same calm expression he always has, like time doesn't touch him. We didn't hug, we just smiled. It felt strange, but real. We talked about music, his new projects, how strange it feels to wake up some days and not have a schedule dictated by the same rhythm we once shared. Then, just as I was about to leave, he said something that stopped me cold. "Jungkook," he said, "you've always been the one who runs ahead. But when you look back, make sure you're not running alone." I didn't respond right away because I knew he wasn't warning me. He was reminding me that love, even the kind that's built on friendship, still needs attention, still needs slowing down. A few nights later, I got a message from Jimin. No words, just a video. It was a clip from one of our earliest dance rehearsals when we were still trying to find our style. We looked so young, so full of reckless energy. At the end of the clip, there was a line I'd forgotten. Jimin had turned to me and said, laughing, "No matter what happens, we'll always move in sync." I watched that part over and over. I didn't reply to his message. I didn't know how, because the truth is, I don't know if we're still in sync anymore. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's just life teaching us that harmony doesn't always mean matching steps. Sometimes it means trusting that everyone will find their rhythm again in their own time. I'm learning to believe that distance doesn't erase connection, it tests it. I went to Yoongi's studio last week. He was working on something soft and slow, the kind of song that feels like a confession. I sat in the corner, listening, and he said, "You're thinking too loud." I smiled. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what love looks like for me now. He didn't look up from the piano. Love looks like understanding, not ownership, he said. If people can't understand where you're going, it's not your job to shrink yourself. It's your job to keep walking honestly. Those words stayed with me. Love looks like understanding, not ownership. Maybe that's what's been missing all along, not love itself, but the space to understand each other again. Taehyung and Jimin aren't angry. They're just adjusting to the idea that I'm building a part of my life they're not fully part of. It's not rejection, it's recalibration. That night, I wrote in my journal, maybe love is when you still care, even when you no longer control. That sentence broke something open inside me because it made me see that growing apart doesn't mean growing cold. It means trusting love enough to survive without constant reassurance. When I think about the wedding, this thing that still feels like a possibility more than a plan, I realize it's not about proving anything to the world. It's about making peace with who I am becoming. It's about learning to love without losing. And maybe, for now, that means accepting that the people I love most need time to adjust, to let go, to rediscover where they stand in my life. There was a moment last night when I stood by the window, watching the city lights fade into the horizon, and I thought about them both. I imagined Jimin's quiet smile, the one that always says more than words. I imagined Taehyung's calm eyes, the way they hold both mischief and wisdom. And I realized something. Love doesn't demand presence, it just asks for faith. So if they're not there when that day finally comes, if their seats are empty, it won't mean distance. It'll mean trust. Trust that even from afar, they'll be rooting for me. Trust that no matter how far we drift, there's still an invisible thread connecting us, made not of obligation, but of gratitude. Because everything I am, the way I see the world, the way I love, the way I breathe under pressure exists because of what we built together. They taught me how to live from the heart, and that's something I'll carry into any love that finds me. So when people ask why Jimin and Taehyung might not be at my wedding, I'll smile and say, because real love doesn't always need to show up. Sometimes it just needs to stay. And maybe years from now, when all of this is quieter, we'll find ourselves sitting together again, no cameras, no noise, just 7 souls who went through the storm and found their way home again. Because love that's built on truth doesn't fade. It just waits for the right time to return. There's something about nights like this, quiet, windless, full of thoughts that don't have anywhere to go. I keep thinking about how everything can feel both beautiful and unbearably heavy at the same time. People say success brings peace, but that's not always true. Sometimes it brings echoes. Echoes of what you've lost, echoes of who you used to be, echoes of people who used to be so close that even silence felt shared. When I close my eyes, I still see them, Jimin laughing too hard over something small, Taehyung staring at the stars like they were answering him. Those memories don't belong to fame or to fans. They belong to us. To a time when the world was smaller, but our hearts were full enough to believe that nothing could ever pull us apart. But time is a quiet thief. It doesn't take things suddenly. It just asks for little pieces until one day you realize you've been giving them away without noticing. I've spent months wondering if I did something wrong, if thinking about marriage too early, too publicly, somehow sent the wrong message that I was leaving, choosing, dividing. But it's not like that. It never was. I'm not walking away from what we built. I'm just trying to find what comes after the dream. Because the truth is, dreams don't tell you what to do when you've already achieved them. They don't tell you how to live when the music stops and you're left with yourself. That's where I am right now, standing in the silence between what was and what's next. And in that silence, I've realized something about love. It doesn't vanish when people change, it transforms. It hides in gestures instead of words. It lingers in thought instead of presence. That's what's happening with Jimin and Taehyung. We still love each other, but we're learning how to love differently. The last time Jimin and I spoke face to face, it wasn't emotional or dramatic. It was quiet. We met by chance after weeks of silence, and for a few moments it was like nothing had changed. Then he said something I can't forget. It's not that I don't support you, Kook. I just don't know how to be part of this version of your life. That hit me harder than I expected. Because that's the part of love. People don't talk about the part where someone isn't angry or jealous, just lost. Lost in the new rhythm of who you've become. Taehyung, on the other hand, deals with things through music. He sent me a short melody one night with no words, no explanation. It was soft, melancholic, full of pauses, like he'd recorded his thoughts between breaths. I listened to it on loop. It sounded like forgiveness and longing woven together. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how. I just listened, letting it speak for both of us. I've come to realize that silence is its own kind of language. Sometimes it's not about avoiding conversation, it's about honoring emotions too big for words. That's what I think we're doing now. Honoring something sacred by not forcing it into explanations. Because how do you explain a bond that's built on years of laughter, pain, shared dreams, and endless nights of music? You can't. You just live with it, grateful, even when it hurts. Yoongi said something to me recently while we were in the studio. You can't keep apologizing for changing, Kook. The point of life isn't to stay the same person people first loved, it's to become someone worthy of that love lasting. That sentence cracked me open, because maybe that's what all of this is really about, growth. Maybe it's not about who's right or wrong, who stayed or who left. Maybe it's about who kept their heart open through it all. Some nights, I look through old messages, random texts from Jimin filled with hearts, inside jokes from Taehyung that still make me smile. I don't delete them, even though part of me knows I should stop looking back so often. But there's comfort in remembering. There's truth in nostalgia. It reminds you that you didn't imagine the love you felt. It was real. It still is. I've started writing again, not songs for release, just words for healing. In one of my journals, I wrote, "Love isn't always presence. Sometimes it's permission. Permission to grow, to move forward, to find happiness in new forms." I think that's what Jimin and Taehyung are giving me now, even if they don't realize it. Their absence is its own kind of blessing. It's giving me space to become someone I can be proud of when we finally meet again. And when I imagine that future, I don't see distance. I see reunion. Maybe we'll meet one night without planning it. Maybe at a concert. Maybe in a quiet restaurant. There'll be no cameras, no interviews, just laughter returning like it never left. And we'll look at each other, older but softer. And we'll know that none of it was for nothing. Every silence, every misunderstanding, every tear, it all meant something. Because love that survives distance doesn't weaken, it deepens. It turns from noise into melody, from heat into warmth. And that's what they are to me now. Jimin is still the pulse in my heart when I sing. Taehyung is still the calm in my mind when I doubt myself. They're still here, just not in the same way. And I've made peace with that. So when people ask me why they might not come to my wedding, I don't explain anymore. I just smile and say, because love doesn't always need to be seen to be real. They'll understand one day. We all will. Because real love doesn't demand constant proof. It just endures quietly, faithfully, like a song that never truly ends. And when that day finally comes, whenever it is, I'll stand there and know that I'm not alone. Even if they're miles away, even if they never say a word, I'll feel them there. Because the people who helped you become who you are never really leave. They just live inside your heart, reminding you that love doesn't end when life changes, it evolves, just like we did. There's a certain stillness that comes, after all the storms. It's not relief, it's reflection. I think that's where I am now. After months of trying to make sense of it, all the misunderstandings, the distance, the silence, I've realized something simple but painful. Love doesn't always need fixing. Sometimes it just needs room. I've stopped asking when things will go back to the way they were, because the truth is, they won't. And maybe that's okay. We're not supposed to stay frozen in a single version of ourselves forever. We're meant to evolve, to drift and return, to lose and rediscover. That's what I've learned watching all of us, me, Jimin, Taehyung, all 7 of us grow into men shaped by the same story but walking different paths. I went for a late drive last week. No destination, just me and the road. The night air was cool, and the city lights blurred like they were breathing. I played one of our old songs by accident. It came on shuffle, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because of sadness, but because of gratitude. Every lyric, every harmony, every shout of energy reminded me that love had already done its job. It had built something that time can't destroy. That's when I understood what Jimin once meant when he said, "We don't lose people, kook. We just meet them again in different ways." He was right. I meet them every day in music, in memories, in the way I still look for their names before mine, in the quiet strength they left behind. Taehyung texted me recently. No long message, just, "I heard the song. It sounds like peace." I didn't even ask which song he knew. He always knows. And that's how I realized that the bond we share doesn't need constant conversation. It lives on in recognition, in the way we still feel each other without needing to explain. I saw Jimin again a few nights later. It was late, almost midnight. He showed up at my place with takeout, just like old times. We didn't talk about the past or the future. We just ate in silence, comfortable again. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You're lighter now, happier." I smiled, and for once, I didn't feel the need to defend it. Maybe happiness doesn't mean having everyone agree with your choices. It just means finally being at peace with them. I told him I still wanted him there when the wedding happens, whenever it happens. He didn't say yes or no. He just nodded, and that was enough. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't come in words, it comes in presence. Namjoon told me something once that I think about often. You can't carry people forever, but you can love them for life. I didn't understand it then, but now I do. Carrying means control. Loving means freedom. I think that's what I'm doing now, loving them freely, without needing to keep them close. When I imagine the wedding now, I don't see empty seats anymore. I see invisible ones filled with laughter, with memories, with echoes of all the moments that made me who I am. I see Jimin's quiet smile somewhere in the crowd, Taehyung's knowing eyes watching from a distance. I see Yoongi's calm, Jin's warmth, Namjoon's wisdom, Hobi's light. They'll all be there, even if no one else can see them. Because family doesn't need attendance, it needs belief. And maybe that's what this whole journey has been about, learning that love doesn't die when life changes. It just changes form. It goes from loud to quiet, from presence to prayer, from hands held to hearts remembered. That's what growing up feels like. It's not about leaving, it's about caring gently without breaking what's sacred. So no, this isn't a story about who's coming to my wedding and who's not. It's about how love continue